Let me show you an example. This example is about hedging. Remember, hedging means actually it's the main purpose, main function of financial derivatives to reduce the risk. The example that I want to provide to you now is we want to reduce the risk of price changes. So, and hedging, how to hedge using financial derivative instruments. For hedging, you just need to take another reverse position on the underlying asset. So this means that if you are already long, and you're long, for example, means you already bought some assets, already bought, for example, crude palm oil. Now you want to hedge, means you want to reduce the risk of price changes in the future of this crude palm oil. So you need to just take another reverse position on the same crude palm oil. Means you use futures contracts and take, so when you already bought crude palm oil, means you are already long in crude palm oil, so you just take an additional reverse position, means you take a short position on the same crude palm oil, and now you hedge. Means if the price of crude palm oil in the future changes, it won't affect you, right? Sometimes you are short, right? If you are short on the underlying asset, then you take another long, means another reverse position on the same underlying asset. So if you're already short on the underlying asset, then you long futures contract to hedge. So to hedge, you just need to take an additional reverse position on the same underlying asset. We are talking about futures contract, right? So now I want to show you the most important slide for futures contract. If you want to answer futures contract, if it's about hedging, the very first thing you need to know is to identify the position on the underlying asset. You remember futures contracts, they have two parties, and one party buys the contract, another party shorts the contract. One party buys or long the contract, another party sells or short the contract. Buy means long, short means sell. So buy and sell, or long and short, these two parties complete each other, and then we will have futures contract. So if you want to determine what should be the position on the futures contract, means you already are long or you're already short on something, on an asset. It can be anything, any assets. So now you want to use futures contract to hedge, to reduce the risk of price changes in the future. So how you can do this? Step number one, identify what's your position, whether you are long or whether you are short on the underlying asset, then take another reverse position on the same underlying asset. Okay, let's be specific. For example, suppose that you're already long on oil. If you are already long on oil, what is your concern? Long means you already bought oil, right? If I already bought oil, my concern in the future is if the price of oil goes down. This means a bad news for me, right? This is a bad news for me. If I already bought, or last week I bought oil, and next week the price of oil goes down, this is bad for me, right? So my concern is what happens if the price of oil goes down? Why? Because I already bought oil, because I'm long on oil. So what I do, I just short futures contract. I sell futures contract. So I already have oil, and I just short or sell futures contract, and then this contract allows me to sell oil at the specified price in the contract in the next, for example, next week, next month, in the next 3 months, right? So how I identified I should sell or I should short futures contract on oil? First, I identify what is my position on oil. I already bought oil, means I'm long, right? So how to do it? First, identify what's your position on the underlying asset. How I identify it? Sometimes it's complicated. I tell you the secret. This is the most important part of this video. You need to identify what is your concern. Whether your concern is the price will go up or the price will go down. If your concern is the price will go up, means you are short. If your concern is that the price may go down, this means you are long, right? So that's all. Don't use any other method. Don't use any other method. So the very, very first step, before even the first step that I mentioned, so often you want to answer futures questions on hedging. Number one, identify what is your concern. There are two parties. What is their concerns regarding the price or whatever changes? So if the concern is the price, if the concern, my concern is the price may go up, this means I'm already short, because if I'm short, I believe that the price will go down. But now what if the price goes up? This means loss for me, right? So if your concern is the price will go up, this means you are short. If your concern is the price may go down, this means you are long. Like the example that I gave you in the beginning about the oil. If you already bought oil, this means your concern is the price. What if the price goes down? This is bad for me, so you are long. So how to answer the questions? First, ask this question. This is the most important question. What is the concern of this person? What is my concern regarding the asset? And then if your concern is the price will go up, this means you are short. If your concern is the price will go down, this means you are long. And then you just take an additional reverse position. So if you are long on the asset, you just short futures contract. If you are short on the asset, you just long the futures contract. Long the futures contract means buy futures contracts. If short futures contract means sell futures contract. So keep this in mind, and now let's answer this question. So, suppose there is a farmer, cocoa farmer, and a confectioner, and cocoa farmer produces and sells cocoa, and confectioner buys consumed cocoa. So we have two parties, both are interested in, both are talking about what's called cocoa. The asset here is cocoa. So cocoa farmer sells cocoa and confectioner buys cocoa, right? Now, assume farmer expects to produce 120 tons of cocoa in 6 months' time. The futures contracts are available in 3, 6, 9, and 12-month maturity with a standard size of 10 tons per contract. The current quoted price for 6-month cocoa future is 100 ringgit per ton. This means that the price of each contract is 1,000 ringgit. Why? Because as you can see, there is the size of the contract is 100 ton. Sorry, the size of the contract is 10. So here is mentioned that 10. Let me use this. So the size of the contract is 10 ton per each contract, and the price per ton is 100 ringgit. This means that 10 multiplied by 100, 1,000 ringgit is the value of each contract. Now let's assume that both parties, for example, the cocoa farmer wants to sell 120, and will produce 120 tons of cocoa in 6 months, and also confectioner needs 120 tons of cocoa in 6 months. Now, how these two parties can hedge, can use futures contract to hedge. So why would they need to hedge? Because the cocoa farmer who is producing cocoa, he will prepare the cocoa in 6 months' time. Now, what happens if the price of cocoa goes down? This is a bad news for the farmer. On the other hand, we have confectioner. The confectioner needs cocoa in 6 months, 120 tons of cocoa in 6 months. And what happens if the price of cocoa goes up? This is a bad news for the confectioner. So they want to reduce the risk of price changes, both parties, and both are interested in 120 tons of cocoa. So they may use futures contract to reduce this risk. Okay. So how they can use futures contracts? So the first step, as I mentioned, is to identify the concern of each party. So the cocoa farmer is producing cocoa, and the cocoa will be prepared in 6 months. So now, what is the concern of cocoa farmer? His concern is, what if the price goes down? If the price goes down, the cocoa farmer will get less money, right? Will receive less money, can sell at a cheaper price, and maybe it's a loss, means less profit or even a loss for the cocoa farmer. So cocoa farmer's concern is if the price goes down. This means that he is lying. You remember in the beginning, in the previous slide, I just mentioned that the first slide. If your concern is the price will go down, this means you are lying. That's all. So if cocoa farmer is lying, this means cocoa farmer needs to sell futures contract, take an additional reverse position on the position that you have on the asset. So the cocoa farmer sells futures contract. How many contracts? There are 120 tons. So each contract can cover 10, as I mentioned in the previous slide, 10 tons, so 12 contracts. So the cocoa farmer needs to sell 12 contracts. And what about the confectioner? The confectioner, his concern is, because he needs cocoa 6 months later. So now his concern is, what if the price goes up? Then I have to pay more because I want this cocoa, I want to buy it 6 months later. So as the concern of confectioner is, what if the price goes up? It's a bad news for confectioner. So this means that confectioner is short. As the confectioner is short, so the confectioner needs to buy or long futures contracts. How many? 12, because we are talking about 120 tons. So that's all. And then after 6 months, the farmer will receive 12,000 ringgit and confectioner will pay 12,000 ringgit. But they don't know each other because there is a clearing house sitting there and handle all these things. We discussed all these details before. So how it works, this hedging? Okay. This is from, this table has been prepared from cocoa farmers' perspective. So from the cocoa farmers' perspective, let's see how the cocoa farmer, by selling futures contract, could reduce the risk of price changes. So assume that in the next 6 months, next 6 months later, if the price of cocoa increases, this means that the value of the asset will increase. So this means that because your cocoa farmer, he is producing cocoa. So in 6 months, he will have cocoa. So the value of his cocoa in his warehouse will increase. But what happens to his futures contracts? Because these futures contracts lock in the price at 100 ringgit per ton. So because these futures contracts obligate the farmer to sell cocoa at 100 ringgit per ton 6 months later, if later the price of cocoa increases in the market, for example, increases to 200 ringgit per ton, so this means a loss for the loss on futures contract for farmer, because this contract, the contract is a piece of paper, right? So this contract obligates the farmer to sell at a fixed price, to sell cocoa at a fixed price, which is 100 ringgit per ton. But assume 6 months later the price has increased in the market and people are trading cocoa at 150 or 200 ringgit per ton. In this case, so it's a loss. This contract is a loss. The farmer has to follow it, and although the price in the market is 150 or 200, still the farmer has to sell it at 100. So it's a loss for the farmer, right? So here negative means loss. Now this positive sign with negative sign, we cancel out each other. The profit here and the loss here, we cancel out each other, and the farmer won't be affected. Is the case that the price increases? What happens if the price of cocoa decreases in the market? So if the price of cocoa decreases in the market, Now, cocoa farmer, 6 months later, he already has a warehouse full of cocoa. So the value of this cocoa will decrease. So negative impact on the value of his assets means he's already long on cocoa, means already have cocoa in the warehouse. So it's a loss for him. The value of his assets will reduce. What happens to his futures contract? Because futures contract will obligate the farmer to sell cocoa at 100 ringgit per ton. So now it's a good contract because in the market we assume the price of cocoa reduced maybe to 50 ringgit per ton. But this contract allows the farmer to sell cocoa at 100 ringgit per ton. So it's a good contract. In the market, everyone is trading at 50 ringgit, but now based on this contract, I can sell it at 100 ringgit. So it means a very good contract, and this means the value of this contract will increase. So it impacts the value of this contract. In this case, it's a very valuable contract, right? Because it allows you to sell it at the locked-in price, which is higher than the market value. So these two will cancel out each other and the farmer won't be affected. So this means that doesn't matter the price goes up or the price goes down. The farmer won't be affected. This means hedging. So whenever there is a profit on the asset, there will be a loss on the futures contract. And if there is any profit on any loss on the asset, then there will be profit on the futures contract. And these two will cancel out each other and the farmer won't be affected. What about the confectioner? Okay. For the confectioner, as you remember, the confectioner was short on the underlying asset, and then the confectioner bought or went long on futures contract to hedge, right? Now let's see whether this hedging works or not. So if the price of cocoa increases in the market, this is a bad news for the confectioner, because the confectioner needs to buy cocoa in 6 months. So this means it will be more expensive for him. So it has a negative impact on his short position on the underlying asset. So it's a bad thing for him because he has to buy it at a higher price, so loss for him, so negative. But what's the impact on his futures contract? Because this futures contract obligates the confectioner to buy cocoa at 100 ringgit per ton. So it's a good contract because now in the market we assume that the cocoa price is 200 ringgit, but still the confectioner can buy it at 100 ringgit per ton. So the value of such contract will increase, right? It's more valuable. So now these two will cancel out each other and the confectioner won't be affected. What about the scenario when the price of cocoa decreases in the market? If the price decreases in the market, it's good for the short position that he has on the underlying asset. What's the meaning of short underlying position? Means the cocoa farmer wants to buy it 6 months later. So if not farmer, confectioner. So if the confectioner wants to buy it 6 months later, so this means that he can buy it cheaper because the price reduced. And it's a good news for him. So it means the value of this position increased. Now, what is the value impact on long future position that he has on the long position he has on the futures contract? Now, he has a contract that obligates the confectioner to buy cocoa at 100 ringgit per ton. But actually in the market, we assume the cocoa now is traded cheaper, which is 100, maybe reduced to 50 ringgit. So it's a bad news for the confectioner, right? Because he can buy it, he can go to the market and buy it cheaper, but based on this contract, he has to buy it at 100 ringgit. So negative impact on the value of this position. So this positive and negative will cancel out each other and the confectioner won't be affected. So this is the meaning of hedging. Means the confectioner and the cocoa farmer, they won't be affected. It doesn't matter whether the price goes up or down. Whether it goes up or down, they won't be affected. No profit, no loss for them. So this is how it works.